Tell me, how many nuclear accidents do you think the world's had? 2? Maybe 3? Not even close. From the fact that our blood is already full of microplastics to the nasty reality that we're feeding our kids butane, I'm Mike with List 25, and today I'm counting down 25 facts that'll scar you for life, starting with the scientists who enjoy reviving disembodied pig brains. Okay, maybe enjoy is a strong word, but what happens to a scientist's mood when an experiment works out? In 2019, Yale scientists played a real-life Frankenstein and managed to partially revive disembodied pig brains 4 hours after death. Using a system called Brain X, they pumped a special oxygen-rich fluid through the brains. And for hours, the cells actually kicked back into action. They metabolized fuel, they fired synapses, they even launched immune responses, all while technically being dead. The researchers made sure the brains didn't regain consciousness by using chemical blockers, but even so, it obviously completely changed everything we thought we knew about death. And now scientists are rethinking everything from medical treatments to the definition of death itself. Then again, you get experiments like the time the US military used an entire city as a test subject without telling anyone. In 1950, the US Navy decided it'd be a great idea to spray a supposedly harmless bacteria into the fog over San Francisco to see how vulnerable the city was to a biological attack. But as it turned out, that bacteria wasn't quite as harmless as they thought. 11 people ended up in the hospital, and one man, Edward Nevin, actually died after the bacteria attacked his heart valves. At the time, doctors had no idea why these infections were happening, and it took decades for the truth to come out. The experiment not only harmed the people living there, but also permanently changed the microbial balance in the Bay Area, a change local epidemiologists aren't sure will ever recover. And sadly, that wasn't the only Cold War experiment that crossed human decency lines. During the 50s, the US Atomic Energy Commission secretly ran something called Project Sunshine, which involved collecting hundreds of deceased infants' bones, often without telling their families. The researchers wanted to measure how much radioactive strontium-90 was building up from nuclear tests, and since young bones absorb it faster than adults, scientists, for some reason, thought it made absolutely perfect sense to exhume about 1,500 infants from around the world. In 1995, declassified documents finally exposed just how far officials had gone. President Clinton ordered an investigation, and with international outrage mounting, it ultimately led to policy changes aimed at ensuring informed consent in human research. On the other hand, not all threats come from reckless experiments. Scientists have discovered an ancient strain of bacteria living in a cave in New Mexico that has never seen modern medicine. Yet, it's naturally resistant to 26 different antibiotics, including last resort drugs like daptomycin. The microbe, called Pinabacillus, basically evolved its own defenses millions of years before humans ever existed. The scary part? It carries entirely new resistance genes that our scientists have never seen before. So, if you're worried about superbugs outsmarting our meds, well, you should be. They've had a 4 million year head start. Now, remember earlier when I asked you how many nuclear disasters you could name? Everyone knows about Fukushima and Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island. But have you ever heard of Kishitam? No? Well, there's a reason for that. In 1957, a massive storage tank of radioactive waste exploded at a secret plutonium plant deep in the Soviet Union. The blast spewed toxic material all over dozens of villages, and the government didn't evacuate a single person for more than a week. By the time people realized what had happened, thousands had already been exposed. At least 1,000 square kilometers were contaminated, and generations of families were left dealing with cancers and genetic damage without ever knowing why. The disaster stayed a secret until 1976, when a Soviet biologist published an article about it. And even then, the Soviet government continued to deny that it ever happened. They finally acknowledged it in 1989. But for those affected, it was too little, too late. Some butterfly species don't just stick to flowers. If they find blood, sweat, mud, or even urine, they'll happily lap it up. Scientists have even discovered dozens of butterflies swarming over a dead animal, slurping away with their proboscises like it was no big deal. It's all part of a behavior called mud puddling, where butterflies hunt for minerals they can't get from nectar. Blood, rich in salts and nutrients, is basically a power drink for them. The good news is they can't pierce your skin or hurt you, but if there's a spill or a corpse nearby, they'll definitely show up for the feast. As if that isn't disturbing enough, have you ever wondered how much gross is legally allowed in your food? Yeah, it's more than you probably want to know. But I'm going to tell you anyway. You see, the FDA actually sets what they call food defect standards, which is a very official way of saying, yeah, that little bug in your snack, it's fine. Peanut butter, for example, that can have up to 30 insect fragments and a whole rodent hair per 100 grams and still hit grocery store shelves. The typical chocolate bar, that can legally contain up to 60 insect fragments per 100 grams. And tomato juice, that can come with up to 10 fly eggs or 5 fly larvae per cup. The upside is that most of that is harmless protein. The downside? Now, you've definitely already eaten some. Yeah. Sorry about that. It's probably going to look great on a green screen. Strangely enough, human bodies can sometimes come back from death, and it has nothing to do with surviving a little bug protein. Lazarus Syndrome is when someone's heart kicks back in action after doctors have given up and called time of death. It's ultra rare, but it happens. In fact, there's been at least 32 documented cases between 1982 and 2008. It's been theorized that in some cases, built-up pressure from CPR slowly releases and jump-starts the heart. But since it doesn't happen often, even after resuscitation efforts, it's still one of medicine's weirdest mysteries. Today, protocols actually require doctors to monitor dead patients for several minutes, just in case the body has other plans. Sticking with things that don't exactly follow the rules, if you ever find yourself out in the wild thinking of collecting rainwater to drink because it's natural and pure, well, think again. A 2022 environmental study concluded that rainwater everywhere on Earth is now unsafe to drink by US EPA standards thanks to contamination by PFAS chemicals. PFAS stands for per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, and they've been lovingly nicknamed forever chemicals because, yeah, they don't break down in the environment. We've been using them in just about everything, from non-stick pans and waterproof clothes to firefighting foam, and now they've spread everywhere. Researchers have even found PFAS pollution in rain samples from places like Antarctica and the Tibetan Plateau. So yeah, even the rain isn't really clean anymore. Of course, it's not just the environment we've contaminated, it's us too. In 2022, scientists found tiny plastic particles or microplastics in almost 80% of blood samples from healthy volunteers. It was the first study to confirm what a lot of people had feared, that microplastic debris from packaging, bottles, and synthetic clothing isn't just clogging up the oceans, it's now flowing through our veins. The particles they found were as small as a few microns, meaning they could travel through our bloodstreams and possibly lodge in our organs. Other studies have also found microplastics in human placentas and lung tissue, so it's safe to say that we've passed the point of no return. And that's not just a quote from Phantom of the Opera. Nobody really knows yet what the long-term health impacts will be, but one thing's clear, we're not just living in the plastic age, we're carrying it around inside us. We should probably also discuss the fact that modern tech has found even more ways to mess with our bodies. And I'm not talking about the effects of social media on our brains. In 2017, the FDA revealed that hundreds of thousands of implanted pacemakers had a software flaw that made them vulnerable to hackers. They immediately issued a recall, which affected about 465,000 devices, and doctors everywhere had to install a critical firmware update. Why the rush, you might ask? Well, the flaw meant that an outsider could theoretically hijack the pacemaker over its wireless connection, draining the battery or even changing the patient's heartbeat remotely. There were no confirmed malicious attacks, but the fact that it was even possible was a massive wake-up call. There's also the matter of that live nuclear bomb casually sitting off the coast of Georgia. It was lost in February 1958 when a U.S. Air Force bomber collided with a fighter jet during a training flight. To avoid risking a catastrophic explosion on landing, the crew made the call to jettison a 7,600-pound nuclear bomb into the waters near Tybee Island. The Navy launched a massive search effort covering a 3-square-mile area with divers and sonar, but they never find it. The so-called Tybee bomb is still out there somewhere, buried under sand or silt on the sea floor. According to the government, the bomb's nuclear capsule wasn't installed, so basically it can't explode. Unless, of course, it's disturbed. Oh, and yeah, did I mention the U.S. military has lost and never found at least 3? And speaking of disasters just waiting to happen, did you know we're overdue for another volcanic super eruption? New research published in Nature has found that these massive eruptions start building pressure deep underground for millions of years, long before anything explodes at the surface. Based on geological records, super eruptions are expected roughly every 20,000 years. The problem? Well, the last one we know about was about 26,000 years ago in New Zealand, which means, statistically, we're living on borrowed time. These eruptions can devastate entire regions with fast-moving pyroclastic flows and heavy ash fall, capable of eliminating life in seconds. They're rare, but not rare enough to ignore. Still on the topic of things we probably shouldn't be this casual about, have you looked at what we're actually putting into kids' foods? It's not just sugar overload or mystery meat anymore. Some of the stuff in everyday snacks reads more like a chemistry set than a grocery list. Take Halloween candy, for example. Some of it comes with TBHQ, short for tertiary butyl hydroquinone, a compound with a chemical structure similar to the components in butane, as in lighter fluid. It's used to stop iron-containing candy from discoloring, but studies have linked it to behavioral issues, immune system problems, and even cancer in lab animals. Great for shelf life, not so much for actual life. And TBHQ isn't some rare outlier. It's found in crackers, frozen waffles, microwave popcorn, and a bunch of snacks marketed directly to kids. The FDA limits how much companies can use, but why is it in there at all? Okay. It's time for a terrible, horrific, brutal truth. There are more people living in slavery today than at any other point in history. Right now, as you're sitting in your chair or on your comfortable bed, over 50 million people are trapped in modern slavery. About 27.6 million in forced labor and another 22 million in marriages they didn't choose. And no, this isn't limited to one region or one type of government. Modern slavery exists in every single country on Earth. It's less visible than the historic slave trades we learn about in school, but it's arguably more pervasive, especially for women, children, and migrants who are often the most vulnerable. Alright, let me tone it down for a minute. Did you know your pinky toe can actually auto-amputate under the right conditions? It won't just happen by chance, but in certain cases, like when a diabetic patient develops dry, well-demarcated gangrene, the pinky toe can literally detach itself from the body without any surgery. You see, once the tissue starts to die and dry out, there's no reversing it. So the toe basically just cuts itself off from blood flow, shrivels up, and eventually falls away on its own. But body horror doesn't stop at the ankle. In fact, it's waiting for you by the sink. We all know that flushing a toilet without the lid down sends a fine mist of bacteria spraying into the air, right onto everything in the bathroom. Your sink, your floor, your toothbrush. But have you ever stopped to think about where all that toilet air ends up in a public restroom? You know those hot air hand dryers? Yeah. They're basically germ blasters. When you flush, those droplets go airborne. And the dryers suck that air in, warm it up, and then blow it straight onto your freshly washed hands. So then the next time you wash up in a public restroom, maybe skip the Dyson Vortex and grab a paper towel instead. Anyway, let's do one just for the guys. And trust me, this one's going to make you kind of squirm in your seat a little. One of the most common ways to get testicular torsion is by simply sleeping. Sleeping. It's especially common in teens and young adults and usually happens when the testicle rotates during sleep, often triggered by normal muscle movement, like the scrotum tightening from cold or shifting positions in bed. It is a medical emergency, and if it's not treated fast, that testicle might not make it. Next up, let's talk about surveillance, the constant kind, because, well, that's just the reality now. Privacy in the modern world is mostly an illusion. Step outside your home and you're being recorded constantly, not just by security cams, but by doorbells, phones, street corners, shops, your office, your neighbor's porch. The list goes on. One analysis in a major city found the average person was captured on around 70 CCTV cameras in a single day. And that doesn't even include smartphones or online tracking. From traffic cams on your commute to store surveillance while you grab lunch, your day produces a constant stream of footage. So you're basically living life on camera, whether you agree to it or not. Since I'm on the subject of constant tracking, you're doing it too. Just with your nose. Don't panic. It's subconscious. But researchers have found that we're constantly sniffing each other for chemical clues in sweat. And what we pick up actually changes how we feel. Our sweat carries different chemical signatures depending on whether we're scared, stressed, or in pain. In fact, studies show we can often detect the emotional reason behind someone's sweat, and our bodies react automatically. Fear sweat makes us more alert. Disgust sweat? Well, our faces actually mimic disgust. Basically, sweat is part of our nonverbal language. Without realizing it, we're using scent to communicate all the time. Which brings me to one of the most quietly terrifying statistics out there. Millions of people go missing every year. In fact, over 600,000 people go missing in the US alone. And while most missing adults are found within a few days, 1% stay missing forever. And that adds up to thousands of people who disappear without a trace. Now, let's talk about children. In the US, a child is reported missing every 40 seconds. And the percentage of kids who remain missing is higher than for adults, at about 2.2%. No matter how you slice it, a lot of people walk out the door and are never seen again. On the other hand, some kids don't disappear, but live with voices no one else can hear. As a matter of fact, studies show that somewhere between 5 and 16% of kids and teens experience auditory hallucinations, meaning they regularly hear voices that aren't actually there. For some, it's short-lived, but for others, it sticks around. The numbers tend to drop off as kids get older, especially between the ages of 10 and 14. Still, if those voices don't go away, they can be a sign of more serious mental health struggles that aren't always that easy to spot. Moving on. In 2014, scientists discovered a virus called ATCV1, usually found in algae, hiding in the throats of perfectly healthy humans. Roughly 40% of people they tested were carrying it and didn't even know that they had it. Okay, so what gives? Why does it feature on today's list? Well, it doesn't make you feel sick like a cold or the flu. But here's the weird part. Those who had the virus scored about 10% lower on tests measuring things like attention and visual processing. Even stranger, in follow-up studies, the virus directly affected brain function in mice. So sadly, you could be carrying a virus right now that makes you a little slower and never even know it. Let's move on from the surprises hiding in your throat to the ones in your head. Tell me, are you the gambling type? Do the odds usually fall in your favor? Or let me put it another way. Do you know at least 50 people? Picture yourself in a room right now, surrounded by 50 friends, coworkers, and family. Now, ask yourself, how would you feel knowing that 1 in every 50 people is walking around with a brain aneurysm? That's a bulging, weakened spot in a blood vessel inside the brain. A ticking time bomb most never even know is there. Usually, it has no symptoms. And thankfully, very few of them ever rupture without warning. But if one does, it can lead to a sudden, life-threatening brain bleed. And you would never see it coming. And number 1 on today's list, I'm ending with something disturbingly relatable. Have you ever had a random, horrible thought flash through your mind, totally uninvited? Something like, what if I drove off this bridge? Or what if I shoved someone right now? Psychologists call these intrusive thoughts, and 19 out of 20 people experience them. Which means, yes, it's not just you. For most people, these horrible thoughts are usually just a weird brain glitch, a one-off moment that passes. People with anxiety or OCD might fixate on them, but the thoughts themselves, completely normal. The important thing to know is that having a dark or violent thought doesn't mean anything about who you are. Your brain can throw out all kinds of awful ideas without your permission, It's what you don't do that actually matters. And that's a wrap. Which of these facts got under your skin the most? Or is there one that I missed that should have made the list? Drop it in the comments, because I'm always lurking about. Why would I say it that way? Speaking of intrusive thoughts, and if you're still in the mood for something weird or just a little bit unhinged, check out our related video, 25 Things You Didn't Know About Iconic Horror Villains. From real blood on the set to killers pulled straight from real life, I'll tell you things you probably weren't ready for, just like this entire list. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any new content. And I'll catch you guys again next time. Have a sweet dreams. Sorry.